White Socialite denied black triplets. Now they're VIPs at $1 million car event. Atlanta shimmered beneath the late summer sun, its skyline blazing like fire-polished glass, as luxury cars rolled one by one through the gates of the Peachtree Grand Pavilion. Security was tight. Cameras flashed. Journalists whispered in hushed awe, their voices clipped with urgency as one name buzzed from their lips like electricity in the air. "The Harrisons! They're here!" 3 black men exited a gleaming charcoal Bentley, each wearing perfectly tailored suits, their movements fluid, synchronized, like a unit long practiced in the art of public spectacle. Colin stepped out first, tall and composed, a silver cufflink glinting beneath his sleeve. Then Donald, clean-shaven and thoughtful behind his signature glasses. And finally, Martin, the youngest by mere minutes, but the one with the sharpest smile and a gaze that never blinked. Together, they looked like royalty born of power and purpose. Inside the pavilion, guests turned. Conversations died mid-sentence. Every eye, donors, CEOs, heirs, and influencers, tracked their steps as they moved toward the main floor of the $1 million car gala. The trio was the talk of Wall Street, the darlings of private equity. The billionaires who, legend had it, built their empire from nothing. Only one person in the room knew the truth. Rose Whitmore Prescott stood frozen near the champagne tower, her manicured fingers tightening around the delicate stem of her glass. At 62, Rose wore her age like a tailored gown, flawless, expensive, with every flaw concealed under layers of practiced poise. Her white sheath dress hugged her frame, and her platinum hair, swept into a perfect chignon, glinted under the showroom lighting. But at that moment, all color drained from her cheeks. Her husband, Charles Prescott III, investment tycoon, board member of half the city, and heir to the Prescott dynasty, tilted his head toward her. "Darling," he whispered, noticing her grip on the glass. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Rose didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the men moving through the crowd. Not ghosts, she thought, resurrections. The green in their eyes, her eyes, hit her like a slap. It had been nearly 3 decades, but she remembered. Those eyes had haunted her dreams for years after that night. She had never told anyone, not Charles, not even her closest friend at the club, that she had carried a secret bigger than her pearls and sharper than the heel of her Louboutins. Triplets, black boys. She'd told the world they died the night they were born. "Mrs. Prescott." The voice came from behind her, smooth, resonant, the kind of voice that could lead a courtroom or host a national broadcast. Martin. She knew it was him before she turned. "You look radiant." Rose turned slowly. Her fingers trembled against the glass. For one horrifying second, she thought she might drop it. Her eyes moved across each of their faces, stunned by the symmetry of features she never gave herself permission to remember. Martin's eyes glimmered with something unreadable. Politeness, maybe, but threaded with knowing. Donald stood just behind, his gaze focused yet unreadable. And Colin. Colin stared at her like he was calculating everything, watching her every twitch. "Good evening," she said, her voice dry as paper. Charles stepped forward, extending a hand with a practiced smile. "Gentlemen, always a pleasure." "My wife's been eager to meet you. She was just saying how much she admired your latest ESG initiative." Rose opened her mouth to object, but it was too late. The lie was out. Martin didn't blink. "Oh, we've been looking forward to this moment for a very long time." The pause that followed was sharp. Rose saw it. The flicker in Charles's eyes, his confusion, the subtle tension forming in his jaw. "May we speak in private?" Donald asked. "Just a moment, Mrs. Prescott." "Family matters." That word, family, cracked through her chest. Charles frowned. "I'm sorry. Do you three know my wife?" Colin answered, his voice calm and razor-sharp. "Let's just say we have a long, shared history, and it's time we stop pretending it doesn't exist." Martin leaned closer, just enough for only Rose to hear. "You told them we died?" Her hand jerked slightly. The champagne sloshed against the rim of her glass. The noise of the showroom faded into static. The past was crashing into the present, and there was no exit strategy. "Not here," she whispered. Martin stepped back. "Then maybe somewhere more discreet?" She nodded, barely. Charles gave her a concerned look, but she brushed it off with a forced smile. "Just a moment, darling. I won't be long." They followed a valet to one of the private galleries, a sleek room with glass walls and rare vintage models on display. Once the door shut, Rose turned to face them fully. "Why now?" Her voice cracked with something between panic and accusation. "Why here?" Martin folded his hands behind his back. "We didn't come for a reunion. We came for acknowledgement," Colin added. "We could have gone public years ago, leaked it. Scandalized your entire world. But we didn't. We built ours instead." "And now we're back," Donald said simply. "On our terms." She sank onto the edge of a white leather bench near a vintage Jaguar. "I signed the papers. I was 20. My parents, they forced me." Martin's eyes narrowed. "You mean your parents couldn't tolerate the fact that their daughter was having black sons?" Colin didn't flinch. "We've read the sealed files. Saw the court orders. 3 separate closed adoptions, no contact, no trace. I didn't know you were placed apart." "I swear to you, I didn't." "Does it matter?" Donald asked. "We lived 20 years without even knowing we existed. 20 years robbed from us. Not just of you, but of each other." The weight of their words was unbearable. But Rose, for all her reputation, didn't wilt. She looked up, eyes wet but steady. "What do you want from me?" she asked. Martin smiled, cold, calculated, and strikingly familiar. "You'll find out. Tonight is only the beginning." He slid a crisp envelope onto the bench beside her. "An invitation. We're hosting a gala in 3 weeks. For adopted youth and the families that failed them. We'd like you to attend. Publicly." She stared at the envelope like it might burn her. "And if I don't?" Colin shrugged. "Then the world finds out everything in a less curated fashion. We don't need your name, Mrs. Prescott." "But your silence won't protect it anymore." Then they were gone. Back through the showroom, through the murmurs and flashbulbs and wondering eyes. 3 billionaires. 3 black men in control of the very world that once denied their existence. Rose sat alone for a long moment, her glass untouched. Outside, Atlanta glittered. Inside, the lies she'd built her life on began to crack. The car ride home from the auto gala was drenched in a heavy silence. Rose sat in the passenger seat of Charles's Bentley, the city lights sliding across her face like passing memories. Her husband said nothing, his fingers clenching the wheel tighter with each red light they passed. She didn't need him to speak. She could feel his questions hanging in the space between them, thick as humidity in a southern summer night. When they reached their Buckhead estate, Rose walked straight past the foyer and into the parlor, unbuttoning her heels as if they were suddenly too tight for her skin. Charles followed, uncharacteristically quiet, until the door clicked shut behind him. "Tell me it's not true." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Years of marriage had taught Rose that Charles Prescott never shouted. He weaponized silence and calm disappointment with surgical precision. She turned to face him, eyes tired. You already know it is. He blinked slowly, like a man absorbing the impact of a fall he never saw coming. You had children. Black children, and you never thought that might be relevant. I was 20. My parents sent me away. They told me that they died, he interrupted, pacing to the bar and pouring himself a bourbon. And you believed them? No, she admitted. They said the babies would be adopted. That it was the only way forward. And I didn't fight back. I didn't ask questions. I folded, like they wanted me to. Charles took a slow sip, never breaking eye contact. Did you ever think about them? In all these years, every single day. He turned to the window, staring out into the manicured darkness of their estate. They have your eyes, Rose. That quiet observation punctured her more than any accusation could have. They do, she said softly. That's how I knew the moment I saw them. No need for proof. Charles set the glass down. Do Yvonne and Jean know? No. And they can't. Not until I figure out what to do. He scoffed. You really think this is still something you can control? She flinched at that. They gave me an invitation to some gala they're hosting. Let me guess, he said coldly. They want you to go public. A grand reveal. The prodigal mother returns. They're not being cruel, she insisted. They're angry, yes. But they're not trying to ruin me. They just want something real. Charles shook his head. Something real. After decades of lies, they want authenticity. In this city, in this world. She didn't respond. He moved closer, stopping just short of touching her. Everything we built, your image, my firm, our daughter's place in society, it all hinges on perception, Rose. Do you understand that? I do. But I also understand what it means to be haunted. The words slipped out before she could stop them. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't blink. I've carried this shame for 30 years. I buried it in fundraisers, garden parties, charity auctions, and I told myself that was enough, but it's not. Charles said nothing. His silence, once familiar, now felt like the closing of a door. The next morning, Rose woke before sunrise. She sat at the edge of her bed, watching the sky turn a soft grey blue. Her daughters were both out of town, Yvonne at Yale for summer courses, Jean at an internship in DC. That left her alone in a house that suddenly felt cavernous. She reached for her phone and pulled up the contact card Martin had left. She didn't call, not yet, but she stared at the number, trying to summon the courage. Instead, she called her driver. Take me to Midtown, she said, the Harrison building. 2 hours later, she stood in the marble lobby of M3 Ventures. The receptionist recognized her immediately and gestured toward a private elevator. They're expecting you, Mrs. Prescott. When the doors opened, she stepped into a sleek, modern office filled with glass, steel, and warm wood accents. The skyline behind the floor-to-ceiling windows framed the 3 men waiting for her. Colin seated behind a desk, Donald reviewing a tablet, and Martin sipping coffee by the window. Martin smiled. I wasn't sure you'd come. I wasn't either, she replied, walking in and closing the door behind her. Donald stood. Would you like a drink? She shook her head. No pleasantries. I came here for answers. Colin gestured for her to sit. Then let's talk. She sat slowly, folding her hands in her lap. You said you found each other in college. That's impressive, given the circumstances. Donald nodded. We had to piece everything together. Separate files. Sealed court records. Our DNA confirmed we were triplets, but your name, that was the last puzzle. And Jackson? She asked quietly. Martin looked down. We found him 4 years too late. Car accident. He never knew. Tears welled up in her eyes. He was a good man. He deserved better than what I gave him. Donald leaned forward. We're not here to punish you, Rose. But we do need something from you. Not money, not headlines. But the truth. Acknowledgement. Rose exhaled. You want me to stand on a stage and claim you as my sons? No, Colin said calmly. We want you to do it off the stage first, with your daughters, with your husband. With yourself. Rose looked around the room. You've built something extraordinary. You didn't need me. Martin's voice softened. We didn't need you to survive, but maybe we need you to heal. That cracked something inside her. She stood and walked to the window, staring out over the city she had once ruled through whispers and charity galas. You want me to be brave, she said without turning. To risk everything I've built. Martin joined her. We're asking you to risk something smaller than what you already lost. Silence fell. The weight of 30 years hung between them. Then she spoke. I'll do it. They didn't cheer. They didn't smile. They simply nodded, as if something inevitable had been set in motion. I'll start with my daughters, she said. They deserve to hear it from me. Martin reached into a drawer and handed her a simple silver envelope. The gala is 3 weeks away. No pressure. But if you're ready, that's where it begins. She took it. Then she turned to leave, pausing at the door. There's one more thing. Yes? Donald asked. I need to know. What's your plan if I back out? Colin replied without missing a beat. Then we tell the truth anyway, but without you. She nodded. That's fair. The door closed behind her. For the first time in decades, Rose Prescott wasn't sure who she was anymore. But she knew one thing. She was done hiding. The Prescott estate had never felt so silent. Rose sat alone in the sunroom, cradling a cup of untouched chamomile tea, staring out into the garden she used to tend every Saturday morning. The roses, ironically, were blooming wildly, thorns and all. Her phone buzzed once beside her. It was a text from Martin. Let us know when you're ready. She didn't respond. Upstairs, she could hear Jean's music playing faintly from her bedroom, something slow and mournful. Yvonne was expected back from Yale in 2 days. Rose had hoped for more time, more space to think before facing the daughters she had raised, without ever once telling them they had brothers. Half-brothers. And black ones, no less. That thought alone sent a cold knot twisting in her stomach. Not because she was ashamed of the boys, but because she knew the circles she ran in, the people she'd dined with, served on boards with, attended galas and whispered at fundraisers with. They would eat this story alive if they ever got a whiff of it before she controlled the narrative. And yet, she had made a choice. No more hiding. She stood, walked slowly up the stairs, and paused at Jean's door. The music inside softened. She knocked once. Jean? She said quietly. Come in. Her youngest daughter was curled up on the window seat with a sketch pad resting on her knees, earbuds half dangling. She looked up with a soft smile, the kind that still reminded Rose of when she was 5 and used to wrap her arms around her mother's waist without needing a reason. You okay? Jean asked. Rose stepped inside. I need to tell you something. Jean studied her mother's face. Is it serious? Rose nodded and sat across from her. Yes. Very. Jean put the sketchpad aside. Is Dad okay? He's fine. And Yvonne? She's fine too. Jean straightened. Then it's about you. Rose didn't answer right away. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan and pulled out a photo, one she hadn't looked at in years. 3 newborns, bundled tightly in white blankets, eyes closed, identical green flecks peeking through. These are your brothers, she said softly. Jean blinked. What? I had children before you and Yvonne, Rose began, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. 3 boys. Triplets. I gave birth to them when I was 20. Jean said nothing. Her breath caught somewhere in her throat. I was in college, Rose continued. It was with someone I loved deeply, but my family disapproved. Not just because I was young, but because he was black, a scholarship student from out of state. My father said the scandal would destroy everything, so they made arrangements. Jean swallowed. What kind of arrangements? They sent me to a facility in northern Georgia. A place for girls who got pregnant but needed to disappear. I gave birth there. My parents told me the babies would be adopted, and that I should never speak of it again. And I didn't. Jean slowly stood, backing toward the wall as if trying to make physical sense of what she was hearing. You never told me, or Yvonne. I couldn't. Rose's voice cracked. Every time I thought about it, I told myself it was ancient history, that it would do more harm than good, that you'd never understand. Jean stared at her for a long moment. And now? They found me, Rose said, her voice barely a whisper. All 3 of them. They're grown men now. Successful, brilliant, and angry. Jean's arms were crossed tightly, but her eyes had softened. Do they hate you? Rose shook her head. I don't think so. I think they're trying not to. She reached for Jean's hand, and to her surprise, Jean didn't pull away. You'll meet them soon, Rose said. They want to meet both of you. Jean gave the slightest nod. Later that evening, after Jean retreated quietly to her room, Rose sat in the formal dining room across from Charles. The candlelight flickered between them. I told Jean, she said. Charles sipped his wine. How did she take it? Better than I did. There was a long pause. Then he said, We need to talk about the gala. She stiffened. They're going to announce everything there, aren't they? He asked. Yes, she said, and I've agreed to co-host. Charles set his wineglass down. Then I assume you're prepared for what comes after. The press, the backlash, the conversations about how your perfect life was built on lies. She met his gaze. I'm ready. Are you? He asked, leaning in. Because this story isn't just going to touch your world, Rose. It's going to crash into mine. She nodded. I know, and I'm sorry. Charles exhaled and stood. You always were full of surprises. Before she could respond, his phone rang. He checked the screen. It's the office. I have to take this. He stepped away, leaving her alone with her untouched plate and 1,000 thoughts pressing in. The next day, the Harrison brothers sent a car to pick her up. She was taken to a sleek midtown restaurant with private booths and velvet-lined walls. Martin was already waiting, dressed in dark blue and sipping black coffee. You came, he said. I'm not in the habit of standing up my children, she replied, forcing a smile. Donald and Colin arrived shortly after, both wearing the same slightly guarded look they'd worn at the gala. I told Jean, Rose began. Yvonne returns tomorrow. I'll speak to her then. Martin nodded. Good. They deserve to hear it from you. Rose folded her napkin carefully. And what do you want them to hear from you? Colin leaned forward. That we're not here to destroy you, but we are here to claim what was stolen. Rose blinked. What do you mean? Donald pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Our birth records, DNA, a timeline of events. And this. He handed her a document stamped by the state of Georgia, corrected birth certificate. Her hands trembled as she scanned the names. Mother, Rose Eleanor Blackwell. Father, Jackson. Alan Lewis. Children, Colin Lewis. Harrison, Donald Lewis Harrison, Martin Lewis Harrison. They changed the records, she whispered. We had them restored, Martin said. It's legal. We're officially your sons again. She stared at the paper, the weight of its meaning pressing into her chest. You didn't need my permission? No, Donald said. We needed the truth. Rose looked at each of them in turn. And what now? Colin smiled faintly. Now, we show Atlanta who we are, and where we came from. As she left the restaurant, the wind picked up, rustling her scarf. A black SUV pulled up, and as the driver opened the door, she hesitated. She turned to look at the skyline again, the city that had watched her rise, lie, and survive. What she didn't know yet, what none of them did, was that the most shocking revelation of all was still waiting beneath the surface. And it would change everything. The Bentley's engine purred as the triplets pulled up to the gated estate in Buckhead. Colin, behind the wheel, killed the engine and let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. You sure about this? He asked, glancing over at Martin. Martin adjusted his cufflink, his signature confidence faltering just slightly. No. But we've come too far to back down now. Donald, sitting in the back, watched the massive house with a cold, unreadable expression. Let's find out how far she's willing to go. Inside the mansion, Rose Powell stood in her sunlit kitchen, holding a crystal glass of ice water that trembled in her hand. Across from her, Spencer leaned against the marble island, arms crossed. He hadn't said much since the revelations began. You didn't tell me about the gala, he said finally, his voice low. I haven't decided, Rose replied. I needed time to absorb. Time's up, he said, nodding toward the window. They're here. Rose froze. She turned, catching a glimpse of 3 tall silhouettes approaching the house, each with her eyes, green and unmistakably hers. By the time the doorbell rang, her heart was pounding so loud she could barely hear anything else. She opened the door slowly, finding herself face to face with the 3 men who had once been infants in her arms for barely a moment. Mrs. Powell, Colin said, his voice clipped. May we come in? She stepped aside wordlessly. The 3 entered, filling the foyer with a commanding presence that seemed to drain the air from the space. Spencer followed them silently into the living room. No one sat. I take it you've spoken to your daughters, Martin said. And to Spencer. Yes, Rose said, her voice barely audible. Though not all truths have been processed, it's a lot. It is, Donald agreed. But let's add one more. Colin pulled a thick envelope from his blazer. This is a formal proposal for a joint foundation. In honor of our father, Rose blinked. Jackson, Martin nodded. Jackson Lewis. The man you loved and who never stopped loving you. We want to honor him. Fund scholarships. Start mentorship programs. And we want your help. The silence was suffocating. I don't understand, she said slowly. Why me? Because you were there, Donald said. You were part of his story. Whether you like it or not, you shaped the direction of all our lives. And if you want redemption, here it is. Spencer looked at the envelope, his voice tight. And if she says no? We'll still do it, Martin said. We don't need her. But this is bigger than business or resentment. This is legacy. Rose stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. You're offering me a chance to fix what I destroyed. We're offering you a seat at the table, Colin said. Just one. And what about the gala? She asked. You'll co-host, Donald said. You'll acknowledge us, not just with a whispered apology in private. With a microphone, with your name, with your voice. She turned towards Spencer. And you? Spencer looked at her, pain written across his features. You've spent our entire marriage hiding the most important truth of your life. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel anymore. You raised our daughters beautifully, Martin said. That matters, but you weren't the only father in the picture. The words hit hard. Spencer clenched his jaw but said nothing. Then Rose asked, What if I do all this, and you still hate me? Martin stepped closer. Then at least you'll have finally stopped hiding. The room held its breath. Outside, a soft rumble of thunder rolled over Atlanta. A summer storm approaching, the sky turning steel grey through the wide windows. It seemed fitting, tension brimming, everything about to change. I'll co-host, Rose said finally, quietly. I'll stand beside you publicly, but not because I was blackmailed. Because it's time. Martin gave a slow nod. Then we'll prepare for the storm together. A beat. Colin turned to Spencer. There's one more thing. Spencer looked up, wary. We recently uncovered an old patent theft involving your great-grandfather and our father's ancestor, William Lewis. You know that name? Spencer's eyes narrowed. I know of him. Why? Because we believe Powell Motor Works built its empire off his invention, Donald said. And we have the documents to prove it. Spencer's face turned pale. That's what this foundation is also about, Martin added. Justice. Historical and personal, but you won't be shamed publicly unless you make us. Rose's breath caught. She stepped forward, her voice urgent. This is not how we fix things, not through threats, through truth, yes. Through openness, but not through war. Donald looked at her. Then help us. Guide us through it. Be better than your parents were. The storm outside finally broke. Rain against the windows. The low hiss of wind. Inside the Powell home, a fragile truce was formed. Not out of peace, but necessity. The triplets stood to leave. We'll be in touch, Martin said, offering a hand. Rose hesitated, then took it. And for the first time since that sterile hospital room 27 years ago, mother and son touched, deliberately, not by chance. As the door closed behind them, Spencer turned to Rose. Are you prepared for what comes next? She exhaled. For the first time in my life. Maybe I am. Rose stood in front of the gilded mirror in her bedroom, staring at the woman staring back. Her hands tightened on the edges of the marble vanity as her reflection wavered. She didn't recognize herself anymore, not because of the carefully tailored emerald dress or the way her hair was styled with deliberate elegance, but because for the first time in decades, her mask had cracked. Downstairs, the Powell mansion buzzed with quiet tension. The gala was only 10 days away, and word had already begun circulating through Atlanta's tight-knit social circles. Whispers, speculation, judgment. Spencer had said little, but his cold detachment was louder than any argument. Rose walked to the window. Outside, Yvonne and Jean were sitting in the garden with Martin. Their laughter drifted up, too faint to make out words, but loud enough to remind Rose of all the time that had been stolen, by fear, by shame, by silence. She turned as the door creaked open. Spencer stepped in, his tie loosened, a file folder under his arm. Is now a bad time? He asked. Depends. Are you here to talk or to give me another silent lecture? Spencer set the folder on the table. Neither. I found something about William Lewis. Rose's breath caught. You looked into the patent? He nodded. I called in a favor at the National Archive. The Powell Motor Works records, your great-grandfather's, were sanitized. but copies of the original patent applications still exist. He pulled out 2 sheets, yellowed with age. "This is Lewis's design," he said, pointing. "Filed 3 months before Edward Powell submitted his. And look at the diagrams. They're nearly identical." Rose scanned the papers, her pulse pounding. "They stole it," she said. "They buried it," Spencer corrected. "But yeah, they stole it." She looked up at him. "Does it change anything for you?" He paused, then said, "It changes everything." For the first time in days, they stood close without tension thick between them. "I've spent my whole life defending the Powell name," Spencer said. "Now I'm wondering if everything I built was sitting on a lie." "You didn't know?" she whispered. "I do now," he said. "So the question is, what do we do with the truth?" They both turned as footsteps echoed up the hallway. Donald appeared at the door, composed but urgent. "We've got a problem. You need to come downstairs, all of you." Rose, Spencer, and Donald moved quickly down to the main sitting room. Colin stood by the fireplace, his phone in hand. Martin was already there, looking grim. "What is it?" Rose asked. Colin handed her the phone. "Read this." It was an article, published just 20 minutes ago, on a mid-tier Atlanta gossip blog. The headline stopped her heart. "Powell Harris, linked to secret black children. Elite family's dark past resurfaces before gala." The blood drained from Rose's face. "How?" "We were careful," Donald said. "We had everything locked down." "Someone leaked it," Martin said flatly. "And not just the existence of the adoption. They have names: Jackson, Oakwood Haven. Even details about the patent." Spencer rubbed his temples. "The foundation proposal. The internal files were only shared with my senior board and legal counsel." Donald's jaw clenched. "So one of your own people leaked this? Or someone you know?" Martin added, fixing his gaze on Rose. "Anyone still alive who might have had access to your adoption records? A family friend? A lawyer?" Rose shook her head, thinking fast. "Everyone who handled it. My parents, their attorney, the judge. They're all dead." "What about someone at Oakwood Haven?" Colin asked. The question dropped like a stone. Rose's breath hitched. "There was a nurse, Beverly Pierce. She was with me the day the boys were born. She said something strange once, years later, when I ran into her at a charity event. Something about how strong I looked after what I went through." "Do you know where she is now?" Martin asked. "I can find her," Rose said, already reaching for her phone. Spencer stepped in. "We're going to need to control this fast. That article's already spreading." "I'll call the PR team," Donald said. "We had a plan in place if this happened. We just didn't think we'd need it yet." Martin looked at Rose. "You need to speak publicly." "Tonight." Rose hesitated. "I'm not ready." "You have to be," he said softly, "because if you don't tell your story, someone else will. And they'll tell it wrong." She swallowed hard. Colin added, "Do you want to be the villain in someone else's headline? Or the mother who's finally brave enough to tell the truth?" Silence fell for a moment. "I'll do it," Rose said, voice steady. "But I won't spin it. I'll say what happened, all of it." Spencer looked at her. "Then I'll stand next to you." Rose blinked, surprised. "After everything?" "I don't know how this ends," he said. "But if we're going to burn, let's burn together." Later that evening, under the soft glow of studio lights in their library-turned-media room, Rose sat in front of the camera. Martin, Donald, and Colin stood behind her, silent but present. She looked into the lens. "My name is Rose Blackwell Powell, and for 27 years I kept a secret." Her voice trembled only slightly as she spoke. About Emery. About Jackson. About her pregnancy. About the pressure. The lies. The separation. The silence. She didn't excuse her choices, but she owned them. "I was wrong," she said, "and I have lived every day with the weight of that decision. But today, I am standing beside the men I once let go. Not because I have to, but because they are my sons, and they deserve the truth." The video ended. Within an hour, it had spread across every social media platform. By midnight, it had been shared by national outlets. By morning, the world would know. But in that moment, in the quiet aftermath, Colin reached out, and for the first time in 27 years, Rose felt something like peace. The storm had come, but she was still standing. And this time, she wasn't alone. The next morning, the Powell estate felt like a different planet. Calls flooded in from every corner. TV producers, podcast hosts, journalists, influencers, even old classmates who suddenly remembered they used to sit next to Rose in AP English. The internet was ablaze, and Rose had become the subject of national discourse overnight. Yet inside the house, silence hung like thick smoke. Rose sat at the edge of the breakfast nook, fingers wrapped tightly around a cup of black coffee, barely touched. Across the room, Spencer stared at his phone, scanning headlines. "Southern matriarch exposes elite racism in heartfelt confession," he muttered, then added, "Better than I expected." Rose gave a hollow laugh. "Give it 24 hours. The backlash will come." Spencer glanced up. "You want to go into hiding?" "No," she said. "I want to find the truth." "All of it." "What are you talking about?" "I made peace with the triplets being mine. But something still feels off. The article's timing, the leak, the speed it spread. It wasn't random." "Someone wanted this story out before the gala. Someone with an agenda." Spencer frowned. "You're thinking sabotage." "I'm thinking a controlled explosion," Rose replied, her voice sharpening. "The kind you detonate to cover up a bigger mess underneath." Just then, Colin walked in, phone to his ear. "We found her," he said the moment he hung up. Rose stood. "Who?" "Beverly Pierce, the nurse from Oakwood Haven. She's living in Savannah." Retired, early 60s. She didn't speak to media, but she agreed to meet, with you, and only you. "I'm coming," Donald said, stepping in behind him. "This could change everything." They left by noon, Rose and Donald in the back of a discreet Lincoln SUV, flanked by 2 security vehicles provided by the Triplets firm. Colin had insisted. The road from Atlanta to Savannah was long, but Rose barely noticed. Her mind reeled with memories, flashes of cold hospital rooms, her mother's voice, the ink on the adoption papers. She clutched a thin folder with everything they had on Oakwood Haven, including photocopies of her hospital records. Something in those pages never quite added up. By late afternoon, they pulled up to a modest clapboard home on a quiet cul-de-sac. An older woman stood waiting on the porch in a faded lavender housecoat, her silver curls pinned neatly back. She didn't smile. "Mrs. Powell," Beverly said, voice low. "Been waiting a long time for you to come looking." Rose approached her slowly. "I wasn't ready before. You still might not be." Inside, the house smelled of old paper and camphor. Framed photos lined the mantel, none of them recent. A kettle whistled from the kitchen. "Sit," Beverly said, pouring tea into mismatched mugs. "But don't expect comfort." Donald remained standing. "I need to ask you something," Rose began. "And I need the truth. Did anything happen the day I gave birth that I wasn't told?" Beverly sat across from her, exhaling slowly. "Everything happened that day," she said. "More than you know. I remember hemorrhaging. I remember waking up alone." Beverly nodded. Because you almost died. Rose's voice broke. But the boys, they lived. I held them. You held 3 black babies, Beverly said gently. But they weren't yours. The room went still. Rose blinked, disoriented. What? You lost yours, Rose. All 3 were stillborn. One didn't make it past delivery. The others, we tried, but you bled out too fast, and they didn't get enough oxygen. Your parents, they made a deal. There were 3 black newborns that day, no names, abandoned by a mother who died during childbirth. Donald's jaw tightened. You're saying, I'm saying they weren't your biological sons, Beverly said. Rose's hands shook. But the records. Forged, Beverly whispered. I watched your father hand cash to the administrator. I was ordered not to speak of it again. Rose felt like the air had been sucked from her lungs. I've spent 27 years carrying that guilt. You were grieving, Beverly said. You just didn't know what you were grieving. Donald stepped forward. So who was their real mother? She died that same day, young woman. No ID, no next of kin. She went into labor on the steps of the ER. We never even got her name before she passed. He turned away, hands on his hips, breathing heavy. Rose looked at him with wide eyes. I'm not your mother. Donald turned slowly. But you were, in every way that counted. Beverly reached over and took Rose's trembling hand. You didn't give birth to them, but you loved them. You wanted them. That matters. When they returned to Atlanta that evening, the sun had set, but the city was still humming with the aftershocks of Rose's confession video. She didn't wait. She gathered Colin, Martin, and Donald in the library and told them everything. The truth didn't crack their bond. It redefined it. So, we're not biologically related? Colin said, stunned. No, Rose said softly. But I would have raised you if I could. And I've loved you since the day I gave you up. Martin paced the room. Then why do I feel like I've lost her twice? Because you haven't lost anything, Donald said. We found each other once. We don't need DNA to stay found. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was sacred. Donald stepped forward, holding the folder Rose had clutched since Savannah. We still have a gala to plan, still have a foundation to launch, and now we also have a mystery. Someone out there is our biological mother. Maybe there's still a chance to find her. Rose's eyes welled. And if you don't? Martin smiled gently. Then we already have the family we need. That night, as the triplets stood on the balcony of the Powell estate, looking out over Atlanta, a city that had once kept their stories hidden, Rose joined them. For the first time, she didn't feel like a ghost from their past. She felt like their future. The gala was less than a week away, and tension in the Powell estate pulsed like electricity. Florists, event planners, media teams, everyone buzzed around the house with urgency, but Rose moved through it all with a strange calm. Not the calm of peace. The calm before another storm. In the quiet of her study, she stared at an old photograph she had kept hidden in a hollowed-out book for decades. It was a grainy black-and-white snapshot of Jackson Lewis, mid-laugh, holding a book and surrounded by students. The moment froze his charm, his intellect, and his warmth in time. She had loved him fiercely, loved him in a way that had frightened her back then, and now, every piece of that love had found its way back into her life in the form of 3 remarkable men. She picked up her phone and dialed. Hello? A woman answered, guarded. Is this Evelyn Rhodes? There was a pause. Who's asking? My name is Rose Powell. I believe you knew Jackson Lewis. You were his sister. Silence. Then, I'm listening. I think we need to talk, in person. Evelyn agreed warily. The meeting was set for the next day. Meanwhile, downstairs, the triplets were holding a private strategy session of their own. "She wants to meet Jackson's sister?" Colin asked. "She's looking for the missing piece," Donald said. "We all are." Martin leaned back in his chair, arms folded. "She thinks there's more." "There is," Colin replied, staring out the window. "And we need to be ready for it." Later that evening, Rose sat across from Evelyn Rhodes at a small bistro tucked in the West End. The woman was sharp-eyed and firm-jawed, with the kind of voice that didn't flinch. After a few minutes of pleasantries, Rose got to the point. "I thought I gave birth to Jackson's sons." "You didn't?" Evelyn's brow lifted. "No, my babies died during delivery, but somehow 3 black infants ended up in my arms and were recorded as mine." Evelyn's face went still. "Do you think Jackson knew anything about this?" Rose asked. "He didn't even know you were pregnant," Evelyn said quietly. "But there's something you should know." She pulled a worn leather folder from her bag and placed it gently on the table. "I've kept this for decades. I didn't know if it mattered anymore, but maybe it does now." Inside were letters. Dozens of them, all addressed to RP, all returned, unopened. Jackson had written to Rose after she vanished from Emory, not knowing she was at a secret facility. The pain in his words bled off the page. "He loved you," Evelyn said. "He never stopped trying to find out what happened." "I think maybe your parents knew he was writing and intercepted them." Rose's breath caught. "I never saw any of these." "They were protecting their future, not yours." At the bottom of the folder was a small, aged envelope, different from the rest. Inside was a handwritten list in Jackson's sharp script. Names, birth weights, notes on infants born on the same day as Rose's due date. "What is this?" Rose asked, eyes wide. "He was investigating something," Evelyn said. "Right before he died, he told me he suspected a private adoption ring tied to Oakwood Haven. He thought babies were being swapped, reassigned, and sold to high-paying clients, but he died before he could prove it." Rose's hands trembled. "This is the list of the real triplets, isn't it?" "I think so." Back at the Powell estate, Donald sat alone in his room, poring through old digital archives. He'd gone back to the hospital logs from Oakwood Haven, cross-referencing birth and death certificates from that day. Something had never added up. Then he saw it. An infant boy, unnamed, listed as deceased. Mother, Jocelyn Reed. Another, Jameson Reed, triplets, all deceased. Donald blinked. No, wait. Next to their names, a tiny handwritten amendment had been added years later. Status corrected, adopted via private placement. He picked up his phone and called Martin and Colin. "We have a name," he said. "Our real mother, Jocelyn Reed." They didn't sleep that night. By dawn, they'd tracked down a woman named Ruth Harwood, now in her 70s, who had once worked as a private attorney arranging expedited adoptions out of Oakwood Haven. She lived in Macon. The next day, they drove out together, Donald, Colin, Martin, and Rose. The house was modest but well kept. Ruth opened the door slowly, wearing a knit sweater and carrying decades of secrets in her eyes. "We just want the truth," Martin said. "About Jocelyn Reed." Ruth's eyes flickered. "You were her sons." They nodded. No need for DNA confirmation now. The facts had caught up. "She was only 19, Ruth began, voice brittle. "A student from Tuskegee. No family." "She died giving birth to you boys. The hospital didn't know what to do with you, but the Powell name carried weight. They needed an adoption, fast. Your mother, Rose, had just lost her own babies. It wasn't legal." "It wasn't ethical," But it happened. Rose's voice shook. Why didn't you say anything? Ruth met her gaze. Because I thought I was saving lives, giving you a future. But I know now. I was complicit in something much darker. The room fell quiet. No one needed to say what they all felt. This had never been a coincidence. This had been designed. A crime stitched together with privilege and fear. As they stepped outside into the warm Georgia sunlight, Martin broke the silence. I want to find Jocelyn's grave, he said. They did. A simple moss-covered headstone in a cemetery behind a shuttered church. No epitaph. No family. Just her name and 3 tiny dates. The triplets stood in silence, then knelt together, placing their hands on the stone. She gave us life, Donald said quietly. And we'll make sure she's never forgotten, Colin added. Rose stood a few paces back, tears spilling down her cheeks. She had come here searching for the truth and found something far more complicated. Something that redefined motherhood, love, and legacy. That night, as the family gathered at the estate once more, a quiet resolve settled in. The truth wasn't just out. Now it was theirs to tell. And the world wasn't ready for the ending still to come. The ballroom of the legacy, Atlanta Grand Hotel, glittered like a dream. Crystal chandeliers bathed the space in warm gold, and every table was dressed in black velvet and brushed silver. On stage, a banner stretched across the curtain. Legacy Forward, a gala for truth, family, and justice. It was time. Colin stood at the edge of the stage, adjusting his cufflinks. Donald paced nearby, glancing down at the guest list on his tablet. Martin was unusually quiet, his eyes locked on the grand double doors at the end of the hallway. Rose hadn't arrived yet. She'll come, Colin said, reading Martin's concern. She gave up too much to walk away now. Martin nodded, though his jaw was tight. Guests poured in. Politicians, entrepreneurs, educators, even a few old money names who had whispered behind closed doors just months ago. Now, those whispers had turned into curiosity. Respect, even. When Rose finally stepped through the main entrance, the room paused. She wore a deep blue gown, elegant but understated. Her silver hair was swept into a soft twist, and her only jewelry was a simple sapphire pendant Jackson had given her when she was 20. Spencer stood beside her, hand at the small of her back, not as an accessory, but as a silent show of solidarity. As she approached the stage, the crowd parted. Some nodded, others simply stared, but no one turned away. Martin met her at the steps and offered his hand. You came, he said. I'm done running, she replied. Together they climbed the stairs. The lights dimmed, the music faded, and Rose stepped to the microphone. Good evening, she began, her voice clear. My name is Rose Blackwell Powell. I stand before you tonight not as a socialite, not as a fundraiser, not as a Powell, but as a woman who once made an impossible choice and has spent every day since trying to make peace with it. The silence in the room was complete. 27 years ago, I gave birth to stillborn triplets, or so I was told. The truth, as many of you now know, is more complicated and more painful. Through a chain of unethical, racially motivated decisions, 3 other infants, born that same day to a young woman named Jocelyn Reed, were handed to me and falsely recorded as mine. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I was complicit in that lie, even if I didn't fully understand it at the time. But these 3 men beside me, she gestured to Colin, Donald, and Martin, chose not only to uncover the truth, but to build something extraordinary from it. Tonight is not about scandal, it's about reclamation. She paused, then added, voice firm, and it's about justice. Colin stepped forward, taking the mic. Our mother, our real mother, never got to name us. She never got to hold us. But we know her name now, Jocelyn Reed. And from tonight forward, the Jocelyn Reed Foundation will fund scholarships, mentorships, and innovation programs for Black youth in underserved communities across Georgia. Thunderous applause broke out. Donald continued. We also acknowledge the historical theft behind Powell Motorworks. The work of William Lewis, our great-grandfather, was stolen and buried. Tonight we begin correcting that too, with a $10 million restitution investment from the Powell family into Black tech incubators and patent assistance grants. Colin nodded. We are no longer shadows. We are legacy. As the applause roared again, Martin stepped to the mic, his gaze sweeping the room. And if you're wondering how 3 black boys from nothing became this, look no further than the women who shaped us. Jocelyn, who gave us life, and Rose, who gave us the will to seek the truth. He turned to Rose and extended his hand. She took it. For a moment, the stage felt suspended in time. 3 sons and the woman who became their mother through loss, love, and reckoning. Then someone in the audience shouted, "To truth!" The crowd erupted. People stood. Some cheered, others wiped tears, and through it all, the triplets remained grounded, calm in the center of their storm. Backstage, as the crowd thinned and press cameras flashed, Rose pulled Spencer aside. Do you think people will forgive me? Spencer looked out over the crowd. I think forgiveness isn't the point anymore. Rose nodded. Then what is? Redemption, he said. And you're already halfway there. Later that night, alone in the green room, Martin found a letter addressed to him on the coffee table. The handwriting was elegant. Old, faint, from Ruth Harwood. He opened it slowly. Inside a short note. Martin. There's something else I didn't say. Jocelyn didn't die alone. She whispered your name as she passed. Martin, she said. She named you. You were her light. Thought you should know. Ruth Martin blinked hard, pressing the note to his chest. She had known him. He had a name before the lie. A light before the dark. Outside, the city of Atlanta pulsed with energy. The night was electric. Change was no longer coming. It had arrived. And the story of the Harrison triplets had only just begun. If this story moved you, hit that like button, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. These are the stories that rewrite history and remind us that truth, no matter how long it hides, always finds its way home.